The first thing Elias Mercer heard in San Rosario was laughter, and by sunset, the same men laughing would wish they had kept their mouths shut. The stable boss looked him over from dusty boots to weathered hat, then tipped a bucket of dirty wash water across the ground near his feet. "No work here," the man said. "Not for a drifter with an empty saddlebag." Elias did not argue. A man could spend his last breath defending his name and still go hungry. He lifted his bedroll, took his horse by the reins, and walked west beneath a sun white enough to bleach the color from the road. 6 miles beyond town, where the cottonwoods thinned and the red hills opened into dry pasture, he found the Redbird farm. One barn, 30 acres of corn and beans, a windmill turning with a tired metal groan. At the far fence, a woman stood alone, bracing a gate against the hard afternoon wind. Her dark braid moved across the back of her faded blue shirt. Dust clung to her boots and the hem of her long skirt. She had the still, deliberate manner of someone who had learned that wasted motion cost more than wasted words. Elias stopped outside the fence. He could have stepped through and caught the gate for her. He did not. "Ma'am," he called. The woman drove one final nail into the hinge, tested the gate, then turned. Her eyes moved over him slowly. Not fearful, not welcoming. Measuring. "What do you want?" "Give me a job on your farm." The wind pushed dry grass against the fence posts. Somewhere near the barn, a loose length of chain tapped softly against wood. The woman glanced toward his thin saddlebag, his tired horse, and the dust of 6 empty miles on his coat. "I don't need you," she said. Elias nodded once. Rejection sounded cleaner when spoken plainly. "Much obliged for your time." He turned toward the road. "I need a husband." His hand stopped on the reins. For several seconds, nothing moved except the windmill. Elias looked back. The woman had not smiled. She stood with one hand resting on the repaired gate, calm as if she had asked him to mend a roof. "That usually comes after a name," he said. "Mara Redbird. Elias Mercer." Something changed in her face. Small, nearly hidden. Her gaze dropped to his hands, then to the worn leather strap across his saddlebag. "Mercer," she repeated. "You know it." "I know enough." Mara reached into the pocket of her skirt and placed a silver ring on top of the nearest fence post. It caught the lowering sun, bright against the gray wood. Elias stepped closer, though he remained outside the gate. The ring was old, scratched along one edge, and marked inside with a symbol he had not seen since boyhood. 3 narrow lines beneath a single letter. His father's maker's mark. Elias raised his eyes to hers. "Where did you get that?" Mara closed the gate between them. "Come back tomorrow morning," she said. "Then I'll tell you why your father died protecting my farm." Elias returned before sunrise, though sleep had given him little rest. A pale line of morning stretched above the eastern ridge, and the Redbird farm stood quiet beneath it, the windmill turning one slow circle at a time. Mara was already outside, carrying 2 buckets from the well. She did not greet him. She set one bucket beside the porch and pointed toward a wooden table beneath the cottonwood tree. On it lay the silver ring, a folded paper, and a ledger bound in cracked brown leather. Elias tied his horse to the fence and approached. "You said my father died protecting this place." Mara poured water into a basin and washed the dust from her hands. 3 days from now, Judge Amos Whitaker comes through San Rosario. Silus Crow plans to take this farm before the judge leaves town. Elias looked across the fields. 30 acres did not seem worth much trouble until he noticed the narrow stream cutting through the north pasture. Even in late summer, it still carried water. Crow wants the spring. He wants every ranch below it thirsty enough to sell. Mara opened the ledger. Several pages carried her name, each followed by figures written in dark ink. "He says I owe the bank $800. Elias studied the entries. "Did you borrow it?" "No." "Did your mother?" "No." Her answer came without hesitation. "The farm was paid for 12 years ago. Crow bought the bank last winter." 2 months later, this debt appeared. Elias lifted the folded paper. It was a notice of seizure, stamped by the county clerk. The hearing date was written at the bottom. 3 days. Then show the judge your deed. Mara looked toward the house. The original disappeared. And the copy? The courthouse copy burned with 6 other records last spring. Elias let the paper fall back to the table. Convenient. Crow has always respected good timing. She pushed the ring toward him. "My mother left a letter naming your father as witness to the sale. His mark is on the missing deed." Elias did not touch it. A dead witness will not help you. His son might. The words settled between them. Elias understood then. A white cowboy with a known family name could speak in a room where Mara Redbird would be doubted before she opened her mouth. You do not need a husband, he said. You need a witness the town will accept. I need both to be the same man. Mara opened a second document. Crow claims an unmarried Apache woman cannot properly manage contracted property under the territorial customs, he plans to argue. The law does not say it. The men interpreting the law might. Elias felt something cold beneath his ribs. So I stand beside you. And suddenly they hear the truth. That is what men like Crow have built this town to believe. Mara placed a small cloth pouch on the table. Coins shifted inside. 3 days. You receive $40, a sound horse, and food for the road. After the hearing, you leave free. Why choose me? Her eyes held his. Because you asked for work before you asked what the land was worth. A hawk circled above the pasture. Far beyond the cornfield, sunlight flashed once from the ridge, bright as glass or polished metal. Mara saw it too. Her face did not change, but her hand closed around the ledger. We are being watched, Elias said. We have been watched since yesterday. The rider on the ridge disappeared before Elias could make out a face, leaving only a thin ribbon of dust behind him. Mara closed the ledger and carried it into the house. We leave in 10 minutes, she said. For the judge? Elias asked. For the church. The road to San Rosario ran 6 miles through dry pasture and low red hills. By the time they reached town, the morning sun had turned every roof pale and every shadow sharp. People noticed them before they reached the chapel. A white cowboy riding beside an Apache woman did not pass quietly in San Rosario. Conversations faded along the boardwalk. A storekeeper stopped sweeping. 2 men outside the bank watched without pretending otherwise. Mara kept her eyes ahead. Elias matched her pace. The chapel stood at the far end of Main Street, small and whitewashed, with a bell that had not rung in years. Reverend Josiah Bell opened the door only halfway. His gaze moved from Mara to Elias, then to the silver ring in Elias's palm. I cannot perform this service, he said. Mara's expression remained still. On what grounds? The Reverend cleared his throat. It would be better for everyone if you found another arrangement. There is no other arrangement, Elias said. Then there is no ceremony. Behind them, footsteps gathered on the wooden walk. Word had traveled faster than a horse. Elias could feel the town waiting for him to become angry, to reach for authority, or to give Mara one more reason to be called unreasonable. Instead, he took the last silver dollar from his pocket and placed it on the narrow table beside the door. You may refuse the payment, he said, but tell us plainly why you refuse the marriage. Reverend Bell glanced toward the gathering faces outside. The silence pressed against the little chapel. He looked at Mara again, but she did not lower her eyes. At last, the Reverend opened the door wider. The ceremony took less than 5 minutes. There were no flowers, no music, and no blessing beyond the words required. When Reverend Bell asked for the ring, Elias placed the old silver band on Mara's finger. When he asked them to seal the promise, Mara said, "The words are enough." Elias nodded. The Reverend did not object. They signed the register in black ink. Mara wrote her full name, Mara Redbird, without changing it. Elias noticed the clerk standing near the back window, watching every stroke of the pen. Outside, no one congratulated them. A man near the bank laughed once, quietly, then stopped when Elias looked his way. They rode home beneath a sky gone white with heat. Neither spoke until the Redbird barn came into view. The front door stood open. Mara had locked it before they left. Inside, drawers had been pulled out and cupboards left bare. Nothing valuable was missing. The coin pouch still rested beneath the flour tin. The ledger remained where Mara had hidden it. Only one floorboard near the bedroom wall had been pried loose. Elias crouched beside it. A narrow red mark crossed the wood. Fresh. Mara knelt beside him and touched it with 2 fingers. Someone was here after the deed, Elias said. Mara looked toward the dark space beneath the floor. No, she whispered. Someone was here looking for the boy. Mara lifted the loose floorboard and spoke into the darkness. Thomas, it is safe. For several seconds, nothing answered. Then a faint movement came from beneath the house, followed by the careful scrape of wood. A boy emerged through the narrow opening, no older than 13, with pale hair, a dusty shirt, and one sleeve wrapped tightly around his forearm. Elias recognized the red mark on the floor. It had come from the cloth, not from any struggle. Thomas stared at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "Who is he?" "My husband," Mara said. The words sounded strange in the damaged room. Elias glanced at the silver ring on her hand, but she was already guiding the boy toward the kitchen. She warmed water, replaced the stained cloth, and gave him bread softened in milk. Her hands were steady, gentle, but never uncertain. "He stays hidden," she told Elias. "Crow must not know he is here. Crow already knows enough to search your house. Then he suspects. That is different." Thomas lowered his eyes to the bowl. Elias wanted answers, but the boy looked worn thin by fear and too many sleepless hours. He let the silence remain. By noon, Mara had set the rules of the house. Elias would sleep in the barn. He would not enter her room. He would ask before moving anything that belonged to her. Thomas would remain below the floor whenever riders appeared. Elias agreed without argument. He spent the afternoon repairing the broken door latch, resetting the loose board, and checking the north fence. A section near the stream had been cut cleanly, allowing 3 horses into the cornfield. He led them out, repaired the wire, then worked on the windmill until water flowed smoothly into the trough again. Mara watched from the porch while sorting beans into a wooden bowl. She did not praise him. She did bring coffee before the sun went down. "You work like someone who expects to be judged," she said. Elias took the cup. "Most men are. Not by the work." Her gaze rested on him for a moment, then moved away. Supper was quiet. Thomas ate little and returned beneath the floor before darkness settled. Mara placed a blanket beside the barn door for Elias, though the night remained warm. He noticed she had mended a tear along one edge with red thread. "Why did you lose your last job?" she asked. Elias looked toward the black line of hills. "I refused to sign a cattle count that was not true, and they blamed you for what was missing. People believe the man who owns the ledger." Mara said nothing after that. Near midnight, Elias woke to the soft creak of the kitchen door. A lamp glowed inside the house. Through the window, he saw Mara standing over the wash basin, rubbing dark stains from her hands. He crossed the yard and stopped at the threshold. She looked up. "You said the boy was safe," Elias said. "He is. Then whose blood is that?" Mara glanced toward the closed floorboard. "The man who brought him here." Mara lifted the loose floorboard and spoke into the darkness. "Thomas, it is safe." For several seconds, nothing answered. Then a faint movement came from beneath the house, followed by the careful scrape of wood. A boy emerged through the narrow opening, no older than 13, with pale hair, a dusty shirt, and one sleeve wrapped tightly around his forearm. Elias recognized the red mark on the floor. It had come from the cloth, not from any struggle. Thomas stared at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "Who is he?" "My husband," Mara said. The words sounded strange in the damaged room. Elias glanced at the silver ring on her hand, but she was already guiding the boy toward the kitchen. She warmed water, replaced the stained cloth, and gave him bread softened in milk. Her hands were steady, gentle, but never uncertain. "He stays hidden," she told Elias. "Crow must not know he is here. Crow already knows enough to search your house. Then he suspects. That is different." Thomas lowered his eyes to the bowl. Elias wanted answers, but the boy looked worn thin by fear and too many sleepless hours. He let the silence remain. By noon, Mara had set the rules of the house. Elias would sleep in the barn. He would not enter her room. He would ask before moving anything that belonged to her. Thomas would remain below the floor whenever riders appeared. Elias agreed without argument. He spent the afternoon repairing the broken door latch, resetting the loose board, and checking the north fence. A section near the stream had been cut cleanly, allowing 3 horses into the cornfield. He led them out, repaired the wire, then worked on the windmill until water flowed smoothly into the trough again. Mara watched from the porch while sorting beans into a wooden bowl. She did not praise him. She did bring coffee before the sun went down. "You work like someone who expects to be judged," she said. Elias took the cup. "Most men are. Not by the work." Her gaze rested on him for a moment, then moved away. Supper was quiet. Thomas ate little and returned beneath the floor before darkness settled. Mara placed a blanket beside the barn door for Elias, though the night remained warm. He noticed she had mended a tear along one edge with red thread. "Why did you lose your last job?" she asked. Elias looked toward the black line of hills. "I refused to sign a cattle count that was not true, and they blamed you for what was missing. People believe the man who owns the ledger. Mara said nothing after that. Near midnight, Elias woke to the soft creak of the kitchen door. A lamp glowed inside the house. Through the window, he saw Mara standing over the wash basin, rubbing dark stains from her hands. He crossed the yard and stopped at the threshold. She looked up. "You said the boy was safe," Elias said. "He is." "Then whose blood is that?" Mara glanced toward the closed floorboard. "The man who brought him here." Elias read the letter beneath the trembling lamp until the words seemed carved into the table. Jonathan Mercer had discovered that Silus Crow was changing property records, creating debts where none existed, then buying farms for a fraction of their value. When Jonathan refused to alter the Redbird deed, Crow accused him of stealing cattle from 3 neighboring ranches. The accusation traveled faster than truth. By the time Elias was old enough to ask questions, his father's name had already become something respectable men avoided saying. "You knew this," Elias said. Mara stood across from him, her hands resting at her sides. "My mother told me before she died. And you waited until after I signed your marriage paper. I waited until I knew you would not ride into town carrying anger instead of evidence." Elias folded the letter slowly. "You did not trust me. I did not know you." The answer was honest. That made it harder to forgive. Elias removed the silver ring and placed it beside the wooden box. "You knew my father died because of this farm. He lost his name because he protected the truth," Mara said. Crow did the rest. Thomas watched from the kitchen doorway, silent and pale. Elias picked up his hat. Mara did not block the door. She did not ask him to stay. "The hearing begins tomorrow at 10, she said. "Thomas and I will be there." Elias looked at the boy. "Crow will be waiting." "I know. You may not reach the courthouse." Mara held his gaze. "Then the town will learn what kind of justice it chose." Elias stepped into the night. The air smelled of dry sage and cooling earth. He saddled his horse and rode south without looking back. 3 miles from the farm, lantern light appeared beside the road. 2 riders waited near an abandoned cattle pen. A third man stood between them in a dark coat too clean for trail dust. Silus Crow smiled as Elias approached. "I wondered how long it would take you to learn what that woman was hiding." Elias kept both hands on the reins. "You seem well informed. Information keeps a man from becoming poor." Crow held out a folded document. "Sign this. State that Mara Redbird misled you into marriage and concealed a stolen bank record. By noon tomorrow, your father's name will be cleared. You will receive 80 acres north of town and enough cattle to begin again." The paper moved softly in the wind. For one quiet moment, Elias saw everything he had lost return to him. Land, work, a clean family name, a door no respectable man would close. "And Thomas Hale?" he asked. Crow's smile thinned. "The boy is confused. Children recover from confusion when responsible people make decisions for them." "Will he speak at the hearing?" Neither rider moved. Crow folded the document once more. "That depends on whether Mara brings him." The silence answered more clearly than words. Elias looked back toward the distant Redbird farm, where one lamp still burned against the black horizon. He thought of Mara standing alone before the judge. Then he looked at the land deed Crow was offering and understood the price. "My father lost everything refusing your paper," Elias said. "Seems wrong for me to gain everything by signing it." By 9 the next morning, every bench in the San Rosario courthouse was filled. Dusty hats rested on knees. Boots scraped against the plank floor. Outside, wagons lined the street as if a parade had come to town, though no one had come to celebrate. They had come to watch Mara Redbird lose her farm. She entered alone, wearing the same blue shirt from the day Elias first saw her, and a dark skirt brushed clean of dust. The silver ring was gone from her hand. Thomas walked beside her with his injured arm hidden beneath a coat 2 sizes too large. He kept his eyes on the floor. Judge Amos Whitaker sat beneath the territorial seal, sorting papers with slow, careful fingers. Silus Crow occupied the table nearest the window. His ledger lay open before him, thick and respectable, the kind of book men trusted because it looked too heavy to lie. Sheriff Vale stood near the door. "Mrs. Mercer," Judge Whitaker began. Mara lifted her chin. "Mara Redbird." A murmur crossed the room. The judge adjusted his spectacles. "The marriage register lists you as Mrs. Mercer. The land record lists me as Mara Redbird. That is the name being challenged." Whitaker studied her for a moment, then nodded. Crow rose and presented the debt entries, the seizure notice, and 2 statements claiming the farm had failed to meet its obligations. His voice was calm, reasonable. He spoke as if removing Mara from her home were no more personal than closing a store at dusk. The bank has shown patience, he said, but sentiment cannot replace law. Mara listened without interruption. When Crow finished, Judge Whitaker turned toward her empty table. "Where is your husband?" Someone in the back laughed softly. Mara glanced once at the vacant chair beside her. "He is not my evidence." "Do you have evidence?" the judge asked. Mara placed the silver ring on the table. A dead man marked the truth. A living town chose not to read it. Crow smiled. "A ring proves nothing. Neither does a ledger altered after the debt was invented." The room tightened around her words. Crow's face remained smooth, but one finger stopped tapping the table. Sheriff Vale stepped forward. "Judge, there is another matter. The boy, Thomas Hale, has been reported missing. Miss Redbird has concealed him on her property." Every eye turned toward Thomas. He moved closer to Mara. "She did not take me," he said. His voice was quiet, nearly lost beneath the shifting crowd. Crow raised a hand. "The child is frightened and confused." Judge Whitaker looked toward the courthouse clock. 10 minutes remained before he would board the northbound stage. "Mrs. Redbird, without a credible adult witness or the original record, I cannot dismiss the bank's claim." Mara did not plead. She did not look toward the door again. She simply stood beside Thomas while the judge reached for his pen. Then hoofbeats sounded outside. One horse. Fast, but not reckless. The room turned as Elias Mercer entered, dust covering his coat, Thomas's uncle's satchel strapped across his shoulder. He did not look at Crow. He walked directly to Mara's table and placed the satchel beside the silver ring. "Sorry I am late," he said. "I had to bring the part of the truth they thought was buried." Elias opened the satchel and removed 3 items: Samuel Hale's bank register, Jonathan Mercer's final statement, and a county map bearing the original Redbird property seal. Judge Whitaker leaned forward. The courthouse grew so quiet that the clock above him seemed louder than the people breathing below it. "Where did you find these?" he asked. "At the mission settlement," Elias said. "Samuel Hale carried them there after leaving Thomas at the farm. Reverend Cole witnessed his statement this morning." Crow rose too quickly. A frightened clerk and a wandering cowboy do not overturn a lawful debt. Elias laid Thomas's folded ledger page beside the open register. The numbers matched until the final line, where Mara's name had been added in darker ink. Judge Whitaker touched the paper, then examined the binding. A narrow edge of torn fiber showed exactly where the page had been removed. "Thomas," the judge said, "did you take this from the bank?" The boy swallowed. "My uncle removed it. I saw Mr. Crow write the debt 2 months ago. He copied Miss Redbird's name from a tax paper." Crow turned toward the crowded benches. "The child has been coached." "Then ask him something Mara could not know," Elias said. Judge Whitaker asked Thomas to describe the room, the ink bottle, and the order of the account books. The boy answered every question plainly. No flourish, no hesitation beyond fear. Then Elias unfolded his father's statement. Jonathan Mercer had recorded the original sale, named Mara's mother as lawful owner, and marked the deed with the same 3 lines engraved inside the silver ring. Judge Whitaker compared the signatures. His expression hardened. Crow's voice remained smooth. "Even if the debt is questioned, the marriage changes the matter. Under common practice, Mercer has authority over his wife's property. If the farm belongs to anyone at that table, it belongs to him." The room shifted toward Elias. There it was. $800 in water, soil, and future. Land he could claim without stealing a page or raising his voice. Mara looked at him, but she did not ask for mercy. She had already trusted him once. Now she waited to learn whether that trust had been wisdom or another costly mistake. Elias removed a document from his coat and placed it before the judge. "I had Reverend Cole prepare this." Whitaker read the first lines aloud. Elias Mercer renounced any present or future claim to the Redbird farm, its water, livestock, buildings, and harvest. Crow stared at him. "You would give away 30 acres and the only dependable spring within 20 miles. Elias looked at Mara. "It was never mine to give." Then he faced the judge. "I married her so this town would hear her voice. Not so mine could replace it." No one laughed. Judge Whitaker closed Crow's ledger and placed his hand over the county seal. He dismissed the debt, confirmed Mara Redbird's sole ownership, and ordered the bank records examined before Crow could file another claim. Sheriff Vale stepped away from the door, no longer standing beside Crow. Mara picked up the silver ring. For a moment, Elias thought she would return it. Instead, she closed her fingers around it and said, "The hearing is over." Her eyes stayed on his. "The agreement is not." 3 mornings later, the Redbird farm woke beneath a sky the color of old silver. Rain had passed during the night, leaving the fields dark, the air clean, and the cottonwood leaves shining along their edges. Elias stood at the front gate with a hammer in one hand and the final board balanced across his knee. The old gate had leaned for years. Now it opened straight and closed without complaint. He drove the last nail, tested the latch, then carved 2 small words into the fresh wood. Redbird Farm. Nothing more. No new owner. No man's name placed above hers. Mara watched from the porch with 2 cups of coffee resting beside her. Thomas had left that morning with Reverend Cole to join his uncle at the mission settlement. Before climbing into the wagon, the boy had shaken Elias's hand and thanked Mara twice. The road felt quieter after they disappeared beyond the ridge. Elias carried his bedroll from the barn and tied it behind his saddle. His work was finished. The windmill turned smoothly. The north fence held. The horses had water. The court papers, newly sealed, rested inside Mara's kitchen cupboard. He had kept his part of the agreement. Mara walked across the yard and stopped beside him. She held out the cloth pouch from their first morning. $40, she said, and the bay gelding in the west pasture. Elias accepted the pouch, weighed it once, then opened it. He removed a single silver dollar and returned the rest. That was the price of the job. Mara looked at the coin in his palm. "You repaired more than I hired you to repair. Then call the rest poor bargaining." A faint smile touched her face, gone almost before he saw it. Elias tightened the saddle strap. He had traveled away from many places without regret. This one felt different. The kitchen window stood open behind them. Coffee and cedar smoke drifted into the damp morning. On the porch rail lay the red thread blanket Mara had left for him on his first night. Small things. Heavy things. Mara reached into her pocket and brought out the silver ring. "The hearing is over," she said. "The farm is safe." Elias nodded. That was the agreement. Was it? She held the ring between them. His father's mark caught the pale light. Elias looked toward the gate, the fields, and the narrow stream moving bright through the north pasture. "I came asking for wages," he said. "I stayed because leaving would have made me the man Crow believed I was. And now," Elias met her eyes, "now I am asking for a place beside you. No wages. No ownership. No name written over yours." Mara studied him with the same careful stillness she had shown at the fence. Then she placed the ring in his hand, but did not close his fingers around it. "A place beside me comes with work," she said. "I figured it might. And truth, even when it costs." Mara closed his hand around the ring. They stood there without ceremony while the wind moved softly through the wet grass. Later that afternoon, travelers passing the farm noticed the repaired gate and the woman directing the harvest from the field. They also saw the cowboy working several rows away, not ahead of her and not behind. By sunset, someone had added a second carving beneath the farm's name. Not Mercer, not husband, partner. No one in San Rosario laughed when they read